This morning, I want to lift a passage out of the book of Genesis, chapter number 22 and verse number 14, a very familiar passage of scripture. Genesis 22 and 14, I'm reading it out of the King James Version, and it says, "And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen." To read that in a more modern translation, the NIV even, it says, "So Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide." King James, of course, says Jehovah Jireh. The NIV translates that, says Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. I want to title this particular devotional, Complete Confidence, Trusting the Providence, Provider, and Provision. Complete confidence, trusting the providence, the provider, and the provision. Most of us, if not all of us, tend to get excited about the provision, the check in the mail, the gifts and surprises, the healing, the open door, the blessing. We get real excited about the provision. But provision is only the evidence of something greater. And that greater thing is God's providence. Because providence is the plan, it's the foresight. Providence is God's divine ordering, initiation. Providence is what positions the provision before we even knew we needed it. And I think sometimes we get frustrated in the providence because we have such an anticipation of the provision that we miss what God is doing. So we can't only shout about provision, but we got to trust providence. We tend to praise the provider, and we should. We tend to celebrate the provision, and we should. But we must become more appreciative of the providence. I want to say three things about these three words: providence, provider, and provision. Providence is God's foresight. That word providence means to see ahead. And long before Abraham climbed Mount Moriah, God had already placed the ram in the thicket. You know the story. God didn't wait until Abraham climbed Mount Moriah, and then God has to figure out, what am I to do now? Now that he's up here, what am I to do? No, God has already seen ahead. Long before Ruth ever gleaned in that field, God had already set Boaz's field in her path. He sees ahead. Nothing just happens. Not in our lives as believers. Nothing just happens. We don't live by coincidences. Providence means that God already saw it and already arranged it. When you're moving toward that provision, that ultimate climax, the ultimate provision that we are moving toward. Providence is all the other stuff, all the curves and all the mountains and all the valleys and all the crooks and all the turns. Providence is God working beforehand. It's his strategy, it's his technique, it's his plan. And even the things that don't go the way we planned as we're moving toward a particular provision. It may not be the way we planned it, but it's still God's providence. Because he's structuring things, he's directing things, he choreographs according to what he wants to have happen. Because he knows what the provision is, but it has to take us through that providence. It's his strategy. It's his yeses and his nos, his crooks and his turns, his ups and his downs. When we go through those downs, we think God has forsaken us. No, God's saying, this is part of my providence. I'm doing what I'm doing to get you to what I want you to have. So that's the providence piece. Then there's the provider that I mentioned. Got to trust the whole complete process, have confidence in the providence and the provider and the provision. So this provider, of course, is God himself. Because Abraham named the place Jehovah Jireh. The Lord will provide. God does not just provide randomly. He provides faithfully because that's who he is. And when you really look at it, provision is what God gives. Provider is who God is. And provision is God's plan. Providence, rather, is God's plan. Let me say that again. Provision is what God gives. Provider is who God is. Providence is God's plan. So don't just trust what he places in your hand. Trust the one whose hands it comes from, the provider. And then trust the process by which he does it. That is providence. Yeah, we should praise the provider, but don't ignore and belittle and abandon and get frustrated with the providence. Then there's the provision. That's God's evidence. Providence is God's foresight. Provider is God's faithfulness. Provision is God's evidence. The ram in the thicket was not the main point. You know, we shout about it and it's good. That's not the main point. That was the evidence of God's providence. The ram in the thicket was the evidence of God's providence at work. It was the conclusion, the climax, the crescendo. Provision proves that the provider's providence is real. Provision is the tangible, but providence is the whole story. And a lot of us wait until we have the tangible. But no, we have to learn how to celebrate even as we're getting toward the tangible. Celebrate provision, yes, but rest in providence. Because providence guarantees there will always be more provision when we need it. Providence guarantees there will always be provision when we need it. So trust the providence. Love the provider. Receive the provision. Don't just receive provision without loving the provider and trusting the providence. Trust the providence. Love the provider and receive the provision. And it'll make life a whole lot easier for you. Because sometimes in that providence process, it may not look all sweet and pleasant and the way we want it to go. But we got to know that all things are working together for the good of them who love the Lord. That's providence. He's doing something in the background, behind the stage, before the check gets in the mail. He's doing something. So you got to trust the providence, love the provider, and then receive the provision. It's yours. It's yours. It's yours.